Hello and welcome to the Crypto Insider Interview. I am Vlad and today my guest is Ecurrencyhodler, who is the Community and Partnership Coordinator at the Litecoin Foundation, but he's also the author of the book Understanding Litecoin, which I have read and I have reviewed in an article. And he was one of my first friends when I first got into cryptocurrencies, and he used to talk to me and give me advice before I was even on crypto Twitter. And it's pretty awesome that I get to interview him because he has lots of interesting insights. And also, I know that he works on some projects, and up until very recently, he hasn't showed his face. I'm not sure how many interviews he has done with this new appearance of his, which is his old appearance, but we haven't seen it up until now. So hello, E.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show, Vlad.
Well, it's good to have you, and I'm pretty sure that you have a lot to say. And previously, I have spoken to Johnny Litecoin
Yeah.
and Charlie Lee, and I'm not sure if there was anyone else who was enthusiastic about Litecoin. But I guess these are great days to be on this ship and on this side of history, as we are seeing confidential transactions being implemented with the Mimble Wimble protocol. And we also witness how the Litecoin Foundation has bought into a German bank and has shares in it, which is exciting and interesting. And we get to see how this part of the revolution is taking over the establishment, or I have no idea how else to describe it. So my first question to you is, what makes you most excited about this whole affair?
About which affair, the German bank or the confidential transactions?
Everything, your contribution as a community and volunteer manager or whatever your title is, and you're going to have to describe it just because I messed it up.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, I guess I'm the volunteer and partnership coordinator at the foundation. We get a lot of proposals to partner with the Litecoin Foundation, and so I do like due diligence and make sure that and help like choose the projects that would be good to partner with. But I guess like for Litecoin, I'm excited about confidential transactions. I'm excited about Mimble Wimble. I think that'll make Litecoin a bit more fungible, right? And that'll make it a little bit more harder in terms of being sound money. And I think that's always a good thing. And right, like nothing's set in stone. We don't know exactly how we're going to implement it, but right now, I think the idea is to kind of do a soft fork so you can choose whether you can have private transactions or go with regular Litecoin public transactions. And so, yeah.
As far as I know, and I have done some research prior to writing an article about it a couple of weeks ago, there is
Okay.
this system which was first presented for Bitcoin as a way of increasing the block size without actually having a hard fork. And it's about having this kind of parallel blocks, which are not really like a side chain. They're on the main chain, but that's where we're going to have the confidential transactions being stored with Mimble Wimble. And do you have any more knowledge about that, or can you describe it?
Yeah, so what you're actually talking about is something called extension blocks. And so it's kind of like a soft fork in the sense that like old nodes don't have to upgrade to be part of like the same blockchain. But the thing is that, old nodes won't be able to see what's going inside these extension blocks that are kind of like next to the main block. But I think that's okay because even in a traditional soft fork, if we were to soft fork like confidential transactions, like how Blockstream implemented it on Liquid, like you wouldn't be able to see the transactions anyways, right? Like, and so I think putting it in an extension block is good because it allows us to do something new. It allows us to implement new transaction formats like Mimble Wimble, something that wouldn't be possible with a soft fork. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think it's doable. One of the challenges though of extension blocks is that when you go from a Mimble Wimble transaction from the extension block and you try to go back onto the main chain, the public Litecoin blockchain, like that transaction will probably have to be locked in for about 100 blocks. And it has to do with how like the transaction can kind of like be, the transaction ID can like disappear if there's a reorg. So yeah, that's one of the, it's like not great UI UX experience for a user, but I think, the trade-off to have something private, the trade-off to have like, privacy is probably worth it.
I know that these are pretty difficult days to be into Litecoin, and there have been some attacks to the community who call it a shitcoin, even though it's the oldest of active altcoins right now, and it's the only one in top 5 who existed, except for Bitcoin, of course, but the only one who existed for a very long time and has been labeled and classified by CoinMarketCap since day one. So how would you counter these ideas and these arguments against Litecoin and against any other altcoin in general?
Yeah, so I guess you're talking about Bitcoin extremism, like the idea that like you have people who are just hardcore Bitcoin fanatics and they think everything's a shitcoin, and so Litecoin is a shitcoin too, right? One of them actually, I was talking to them on Twitter, and then they kind of made a mistake. So they said, oh, if Litecoin wants to implement Mimble Wimble, then it has to be a hard fork, and then you're going to have to do an airdrop, and then like you have to choose which chain to choose, which was completely false, because like the proposal right now is to do it through an EB, right? And that to me was just like a perfect example of how Bitcoin extremists are just blinded by their bias. They don't care about facts. They don't care about like what's actually true. They just care about their narrative of like, oh, Bitcoin's going to be number one and that's it, right? And so when it comes to things like that, it's just kind of sad that there are people out there who just they're trying. I feel like they're trying to raise their social capital, if anything, and they're not really being honest about stuff. And for people who are like true Bitcoin extremists in the sense that like they think only one coin is going to rule them all, I think it's a possibility. But I encourage people to check out the podcast that Andreas Antonopoulos did with Stephen Livera, and I thought Andreas did a really good job just kind of presenting his view that Bitcoin will be like probably the most dominant one, but then there's going to be a long tail of just several different cryptocurrencies to take up the, I don't know, whatever percent of market cap, maybe like 10%, 5% of global wealth, that exists. And so, I thought that was a pretty good argument, because it's really difficult for one currency to be one thing for everything, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, what I'm about to present are two very controversial opinions about what Litecoin is. And first of all, I like to think that it's the gateway drug to Bitcoin, because it's cheap, it's fast, it's a great way for you to get introduced to wallets, to how actually blockchains work, to validations. You have that very easy to use wallet, which is called Loaf Wallet. And you have a small price that you pay for admission for 1 unit, and then you try to spend it. It's very liquid in the sense that it's used in the United States, at least, for various services or goods at merchants. So actually, it's a good introduction to cryptocurrencies, and it's not like noobs get into Bitcoin by, let's say, $100 worth. They lose it, but in a way that they forget their private keys and their words, their mnemonics to actually recover. And that's going to affect the overall liquidity and the supply at large, even though some people are going to be happy and say, oh, if that get lost, then what we own is going to become much more valuable due to deflation. But it's less, damaging to lose some Litecoin or do stupid stuff with it than it is for Bitcoin. So I think it's a great gateway drug. And also, I like to think that Litecoin people are also into Bitcoin and they promote it, and they're not really competing in this sense. They try to promote both of them as, gold and silver. And even though this narrative is not really the best that one can find, because Bitcoin is not really like gold and it has many properties which are different from gold, and it's a different project from eGold, which was something which was trying to somewhat tokenize gold, if that makes sense. And Litecoin is not really like silver because I guess at its peak can be 4 times less costly than Bitcoin if they were to hold up their value and go on in price like they are pegged. And yeah, I guess it's useful to have Litecoin around, even though some people criticize every altcoin and say that there are an inflation in terms of cryptocurrency supply.
Yeah, I think you know, like the Bitcoin and silver, Litecoin is the silver to Bitcoin's gold. Yeah, I think, like some people try to make more of it than it actually is. Like they think, oh, you guys are advocating for bimetallism or whatever, right? And like that's not it. It's just a cheaper option to something like Bitcoin, right? When Bitcoin fees get super high, super expensive, businesses want to save on costs. They want to save on transaction fees, and so they look around for something cheaper that's something similar to Bitcoin, and the answer is Litecoin. We saw that with Abra Global. We saw that with Bitrefill. Like both of those had a Litecoin support to save on transaction fees. And so that's kind of the role that I see. And it's just a useful analogy. Like if you talk to people up there and you're trying to describe, okay, Bitcoin is a decentralized ledger and it's censorship resistant and there's like proof of work, like all that just goes over their head, right? But if I say, hey, look, Bitcoin, just think about Bitcoin like gold, and think of Litecoin like silver, they're just like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it's just an analogy, that just makes it easier to help people grasp concepts.
Yeah. And there's also the testnet theory, which says that everything that goes on with Litecoin is being like a test or a large scale experiment for Bitcoin. And at some point in the future, we might just see Mimble Wimble being implemented as a soft fork if it works for Litecoin.
I mean, that would be crazy if that did. I've talked to some people in the Bitcoin community, and some people are open to it. Some other people are not, and so it'll be interesting to see if we implement it onto Litecoin and we prove that we can do it safely. We'll see what Bitcoiners think.
Yeah, and also I guess Litecoin doesn't really have plans to reduce the block size and increase the fees as a way to incentivize miners to protect the network, as the current model seems to work, and there are at least compensatory or acceptable rewards from mining that they get, and they're pretty happy up to this point.
Whatever challenges Bitcoin has, like Litecoin will have in terms of like supply and ensuring like the security of the hash rate. One of the advantages of having smaller blocks is node scalability, but right now that's not really an issue for Litecoin. Our node, the whole blockchain size is just like over 20 gigabytes, which isn't that much. Bitcoin's is over like 200 gigabytes. And so, yeah, we have some like room to spare, I think. And like in terms of like transaction fees of like what it's going to look like into the future, we'll have to see. We'll have to see how it all plays out.
Do you know anything about the deal with the German bank, WEG, or what it's called?
I actually don't know too much about it. I know as much as anybody else. When Charlie tweeted that I think this morning about like how he met up with some dude from WG, I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. But it'd be cool. It'd be great if like a Litecoin debit card came out of that. I think earlier this week, Shift Card sent out an email to its users saying, "Hey, like we're shutting down our services." So that kind of sucks. That's kind of a bummer. But maybe that's a void that the WEG bank can provide. Like, yeah.
What is the killer feature of Litecoin, or why would you tell somebody that they should get into Litecoin? Is it the community? Is it the liquidity? Or is it just, the idea of being Bitcoin's little brother and supporting that idea?
Yeah. So like the reason I have Litecoin and I believe in it is, it's sound money, like Bitcoin is sound money. but it's also something that I kind of spend, right? Like I spend Litecoin on my VPN, I spend Litecoin on this shirt from the Litecoin Foundation. But like with Bitcoin, that's something that I don't ever touch. You know, I store it away, and that's kind of like I see that as like my savings account or retirement fund or whatever, right? Like that is store of value to me. But like with Litecoin, to me the opportunity cost to spend it on stuff is just not as high, and it's designed to be that way because it's 4 times as fast and 4 times the supply, right? So yeah, I use it to make my crypto payments.
I noticed that there's a lot going on with Lightning these days, and a lot of people send tips and they create video games and they establish some kind of subscription-based system with Lightning, and most of it takes place in Bitcoin. And even though Litecoin has started at the same point with integrating Lightning Network, there really isn't much going on right now. You think it's because the fees are still very low and there was no incentive in this sense? Or is the community just not ready to embrace Lightning?
Yeah, I think it has to do with like developers, you know, people who want to build on Litecoin. Um, like we don't have as many developers as Bitcoin. And so, yeah, it'd be great if more people were interested in developing on the Lightning Network, building Litecoin Lightning Network apps. Over the past like month, I've been like personally helping onboard people onto the Litecoin Lightning Network, walking them through my guides and stuff. And so I think we're over like 150 public nodes now. So that's pretty cool. We're making progress.
What I know best about you is that whenever somebody posts something on our Litecoin, you're the first person to respond. You're there no matter what. You comment and you give advice and you send links and you explain to people. But when you're not doing that, which seems to be like a lot of work, what else are you involved in? Do you have any other side projects?
Yeah, and so like my partner and I, we started a company called Blockviews, and right now we've created this open source development tool for people, and it just creates like a development environment for Bitcoin and Litecoin developers, and it's like really useful if you want to get started on the Lightning Network because right now it's kind of a pain in the butt to make sure your Litecoin conf file and your LND conf file are like matching and like you set up all your paths correctly. CoinMesh is kind of our open source IDE that'll just kind of automate that whole process for you. And so, yeah, if you're a developer, you're looking into trying out Lightning Network on Litecoin or on Bitcoin, check out CoinMesh, our open source development platform.
I feel like you haven't talked enough about your book and how it came to be and how long it took you to write it. Because I guess at core, it's this way of introducing people to using Litecoin and how they should be installing wallets and how they can make their first transactions and where they can acquire their first coins. But you also have some historical information about how Litecoin was invented. And I guess it's an interesting reading. And in my case, it was the first ever item or first anything that I bought with crypto ever. I bought it from the
Cool.
website of the Litecoin Foundation. And a few days ago, I wrote a review for it. I gave you some feedback, but I'm interested to know more about how you came to write it and what kind of feedback you got from it and how well it did on the market if people actually bought it.
Yeah, so like another thing I do on the side is I run a publication called the Litecoin School of Crypto. You can find it at www.theliteschool.com. And yeah, and so what I did was when I first like got involved in the Litecoin community in like 2017, like the beginning of 2017, I just saw that there wasn't a lot of good educational content. Everything was kind of difficult to understand. And so I just spent time reading, hours and hours just reading about Bitcoin, about how it works, about how Litecoin is, the differences. And I just started throwing up articles online, and that started getting some traction. And then eventually, like the foundation reached out to me and was like, "Hey, look, we're trying to sell it like an ebook. We see that you've already put out some good content. Would you want to kind of work together?" And I was like, "Yeah, like I'd love to." And so a lot of the chapters was stuff that I've already written, but then there are a couple other chapters in there that are just like specific to the book. And one of them is like how nodes work, and the relationship between like miners and like fully validating nodes. And so yeah, if you're interested in like how all that works, definitely check out the book. But yeah, like when we first launched it, I think February 2018. Yeah, it was like the #1 bestseller on the Foundation store, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess it was also the cheapest item on the Foundation store, and that's one of
Yeah,
the
it's not
reasons
that
that
expensive.
people could
Yeah.
afford it, and it was an interesting item to buy.
Yeah, and the goal is just to make it easier for people to get involved, right? I think blockchain can sound super scary, super intimidating, but I don't know. I feel like if you, yeah, you can learn more about it, and it's like not too difficult. There's some like basic stuff that you can do to make the whole process easier.
Before I ask the last question, I just want to go on record and thank you personally, because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have got this job. And you were the one, at one point we were having a conversation, you were moderating on Reddit and being involved much more than I was. And I was just the guy who was writing some articles as a volunteer. And at some point I told you, I actually like this and it's a passion project, but I'm looking for something from which I can make some money. And you pointed to me a website which is called crypto or jobs.crypto or something, crypto.jobs, something like that. But I looked in there and I found some jobs for a journalist, and I was acquainted to the idea of being a journalist. I wasn't too much familiar with writing in this business or sector or field, and I took a plunge into the unknown and I tried my luck with Crypto Globe, and I got hired. It was pretty easy because I was involved for quite a few months and I have learned about the news and I knew the basics. And at some point when I was overwhelmed, I came to you for advice and you told me I should read more from the book of Andreas Antonopoulos. And you're like, I spend like a couple of hours a day reading from it. And whenever you
Good.
have something that you don't understand, just read that book and it's going to be beneficial. It's Mastering Bitcoin, by the way. And yeah, I have to thank you for all this because I ended up at Crypto Insider after I left Crypto Globe, and all of this, I mean, both jobs were found on that website which you sent me that day. So it's all thanks to
I
you, I guess.
Wow, like yeah, that means a lot. I really appreciate that. I mean, I was a writer too. I wrote articles, and I know like you can get pretty tough, and so like I'm proud of you, bro. Like you made it. Like even though I pointed you in the right direction, like you're the one who wrote the articles. Dude, even freaking Nick Szabo, I think, follows you too. So that's pretty cool. So I think you're doing a good job.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess I should ask your last question. What do you think is most exciting this year about Litecoin? Because I know there is a halving of the miner rewards, and we might also have confidential transactions, and we might find out more about the deal with the bank. And I guess Charlie always has something up his sleeve to surprise us.
Yeah. If we ever pull off the Mimble Wimble through extension blocks, I think that to me personally would be very, very exciting. So yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much for this interview. This was really great, and it's awesome that you finally show your face and we get to talk
Yeah.
and do a video interview, a proper one. I hope we get to talk some more some other time,
Cool.
because I feel like we were kind of shallow on some points and we might be able to expand when we have more data on the matter. But it's also interesting at this time when we are recording this that Litecoin is leading the way in market recovery and was the coin which gained the most in the last few days. So if this is the beginning of a new bull run on the long term, it's going to be remembered as something which was started by Litecoin. And I guess I sounded like a fanboy, but I still
You
like
are a
Bitcoin
fanboy.
the most.
Yeah, no, everyone should have at least one Bitcoin. I fully agree. Yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been fun, Vlad.
Sure. So, bye.